My name is Leonardo. I had elderly parents who said they weren't my blood relatives. My real parents died in a car accident when I was very young. With no relatives to take me in, I was placed in a foster home and raised there until I was 5. Although I felt the loneliness of not having a mother and father, mealtimes with delicious food were my happiness and the only thing I looked forward to. One day, a kind elderly couple came to the facility. It's a vague memory, but I remember them smiling happily as they watched me eat. They had such kind smiles. After a while, that couple, the Kings, decided to adopt me. I quickly opened up to them, calling them Grandpa and Grandma Patricia. They had a small garden where they grew vegetables and sold them at a local farmer's market. Though not making much, the leftovers from the market and those not good enough for sale ended up on our table every day. I loved Grandma's pickled cucumbers and potato soup. Be thankful for your food, that was Grandpa's motto. Many people are struggling without food today. We must be thankful for every meal, Carter. I hope you grow up to be someone who can help those who are hungry and in pain. Yeah, got it. I nodded seriously and he smiled gently. His teachings have stayed firmly in my heart. We lived a simple life without luxury, but were raised with a lot of love and happiness. I helped with farming while attending high school. I thought about getting a job after graduation to help with the family finances, but Grandpa said, "Don't worry about money. Do what you want to do." I think he understood me. I wanted to do something that would help people in the future, but at that time, I lacked the knowledge and didn't know where to start. So I wanted to go to college to learn about social work, economics, logistics, and a lot more for times like these, Grandpa said as he handed me a bank book. The account was in my name, Leonardo. He had been saving for my education. I was moved to tears by his thoughtfulness. After enrolling in college, I started to study hard. I felt happy but also guilty for causing trouble for my grandparents. I had never seen them indulge in any luxuries. They always put me first. I vowed to repay their kindness in a big way. Once I started working with that in mind, I devoted myself to my studies. Years had passed after graduating from college. I got a job at a food company called Inspiring Foods. Inspiring Foods not only manufactures and sells food products, but also focuses on social welfare through food. Grandpa was the one who told me about it. A friend of his worked there, and he happened to hear about it. "Maybe the job you want to do is here," Grandpa suggested. I was assigned to the sales department and tackled everything from copying documents to data entry and handling phone calls with all my might. I arrived at work earlier than anyone else and studied the material to learn about our products. I also accompanied skilled sales on their visits. I wanted to learn the job quickly and become a full-fledged worker. However, there was one person who didn't think well of me. That was Smith, the head of the sales department. Smith was also a board member and held significant power within the company. There was a rumor that he didn't see any use in people who couldn't help him climb the career ladder, especially tough on newcomers. True to the rumor, I was quickly targeted. Watching me asking a colleague to let me do anything, he seemed to think of me as an overbearing and cheeky newcomer. One day, he suddenly came to my desk and ordered me to come up with a proposal for a new product. "You seem like a hard worker, so you can do it in a day, right?" he said. "Excuse me, that's a bit—" I started, but Smith interrupted. "What? Talking back as a newbie?" "I'm sorry," I said, unable to object. I gathered all the ideas I could think of and somehow put together a proposal, which I submitted to him. It was a concept for a stir-fry vegetable sauce inspired by the cooking of Grandma. Smith glanced at it and scoffed, pushing the proposal back to me. "Who would buy something like this? Our clients are looking for something more upscale. We don't need cheap stuff like this. Haven't you ever eaten anything good?" "I'm afraid I'm not very familiar with upscale stuff. Could you perhaps give me a few tips on how to improve?" I asked tentatively. "Use your head to think." "Well, I guess that's too much to ask from someone raised in a poor family," he remarked dismissively. "This kind of thing happens almost every day." Honestly, going to work became a struggle. but I had a reason I absolutely couldn't quit. I had a dream of taking my grandparents to a fancy restaurant with my first paycheck. I was sure they'd never been to a fancy place like that. They'd hardly ever eaten out. I thought to raise me, they must have made many sacrifices. I wanted to give them a little luxury for once, to treat them to an amazingly delicious feast. They raised me like their own family, with no blood relation, and I wanted to repay their kindness as soon as I could. A month passed after I had entered the company. I finally received my first paycheck. I was proud of earning money through my work. One of my colleagues recommended a fancy restaurant he had used for entertaining clients, so I made a reservation for 3 and called my grandparents. They were surprised when I suggested entering such a luxurious place. "Are we going into such a fancy place?" Grandma seemed a bit confused. "I got my first paycheck. It's money I earned myself as a working adult. It's always been my dream to treat you both," I explained, feeling a bit emotional. Tears welled up in her eyes. "It's all thanks to Carter's thoughtfulness. Let's enjoy the feast without holding back," Grandpa said happily. Hey, can you please take a moment to subscribe? Stay tuned for more captivating stories and updates. Nervous about our first time in such a restaurant, we stepped in. Then, from a back room, I heard a familiar voice. As the door opened, Smith came out. "Hi, good evening." I reflexively straightened my posture and greeted him. "Huh? Why are you here?" He looked at me curiously. Just having dinner with my family," I replied timidly. "This place is for entertaining important clients, not for common folks like you." He scrutinized us and continued, "Coming to a restaurant in such cheap attire is out of place. Even if you eat high-end food, you won't appreciate its value. Why don't you go to some cheap diner around the corner?" His words pierced my heart. It was one thing for me, but I had made my grandparents feel bad too. That was far from the filial piety I had hoped for. Filled with frustration and shock, I couldn't say anything back. Then Grandpa, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "The one who's out of place is you." It was a tone I had never heard him use before. "Who do you think you're talking to?" Smith started angrily, coming towards Grandpa, but when he got a good look at Grandpa's face, he exclaimed loudly, "Mr. King!" Then he quickly went pale and sat down on the spot. "Bringing happiness to everyone through the power of food," Grandpa murmured. That was the corporate philosophy of Inspiring Foods. "I've been meaning to talk to you about it, Carter. Are you ready to hear me out?" He began to speak quietly. "Our family has owned vast lands for generations, which allowed us to live without want. One day, over 30 years ago, the president of Inspiring Foods came to us, wanting to buy our land. He wanted to build a factory for his company to expand his business. Upon further discussion, I learned that Inspiring Foods had been donating food to children in foster care. The president grew up in a poor family himself, often going hungry. He had a strong desire to provide delicious meals to as many children as possible. He was passionate about expanding his business to support more orphaned children, struggling families, and those in need. I was deeply moved by his feelings. My wife and I have always loved children, but were unable to have any of our own, so we decided to help his cause. We kept only the land necessary for our livelihood and gave the rest to him, agreeing with the philosophy of bringing happiness to everyone through the power of food. I became a shareholder in Inspiring Foods and made further investments. I vowed to use my money to help those in need. We've kept in touch ever since, and one day I visited the foster care with him. That's where I met you, Carter. While other children were fussing over not liking carrots or wanting pizza, you were the only one enjoying your meal, saying delicious with your mouth full. It was so adorable. I wanted you to be part of our family, to share meals, so we adopted you. You grew up to be a very kind-hearted young man capable of empathy. That's why I thought you could be of service to a company like Inspiring Foods. That's admirable. Smith stood up and extended his hand to Grandpa. I made a bit of a mistake earlier. Carter is an exceptionally talented individual, he said, forcing a smile and stepping forward. Grandpa coldly shook off his hand. It's too late. You will never understand the true value of a meal, the value of sharing a table with loved ones. Inspiring Foods is a company that saves people through the power of food. You have no right to call yourself a part of Inspiring Foods. It was the first time I saw Grandpa raise his voice. I will inform the president of everything at tomorrow's shareholders' meeting. When you return to the office, don't expect to find your seat there. Smith trembled and ran off as if fleeing the scene. That day, the three of us enjoyed a delicious feast. As we ate, they told me many things I never knew before. I was also able to tell them how hard I've been working. "Did I manage to repay you too a bit?" I asked. "Of course. You've grown up and are working hard as a respectable working adult. That's enough repayment for us," Grandpa said with a happy look. "Today's meal will be an unforgettable memory," Grandma added, truly enjoying the time with the three of us. I felt our family bond deepened more than ever before. The next day, Smith was nowhere to be found at the company. Fearing that his harassment would come to light, he had vanished. In fact, after my case, there were multiple complaints from other new hires and employees who had been harassed by him, leading to his dismissal by the board. Vincent, the colleague who had recommended the fancy restaurant to me, became the new head of the sales department. He said, "No one has worked as hard as you in their first month," praising my efforts. He even took the time to review the proposal Smith had rejected, offering many suggestions. "You might become president one day," he said with a laugh, showing affection. "I want to continue gaining experience and someday take part in a business that delivers delicious meals to those in need. For now, I'm committed to giving my all to the work in front of me, to help create happy moments around the dining table for others. I work for the sake of society today, as always." At the end of the day, how was the story? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more awesome stories like this. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.